The room turned the second that pink sheet hit the screen. A fake inspection warrant glowing under fluorescent lights. My neighbors leaning forward like jurors, while Officer Alvarez stood along the wall, as quiet as a pillar, and I said into the mic, calm as I could be. This is what she slid under my door before she tried to force her way in. Hands would go up for the vote a few minutes later, and I swear I heard the scratch of her nails against the armrest she was clenching, that tiny sound that tells you power just slipped. If you've ever been pushed around by someone who dresses up their ego as authority, you know exactly how that moment tastes. My name is Jordan Hale. I investigate insurance fraud for a living, which basically means I spend my days asking paper to tell me who it really is. And until this mess, I kept to myself in Cedar Brook, Illinois. Quiet street. Tidy lawns, the kind of place where coffee smells like a promise at 7 a.m. Then one morning at 6, I woke up to a hammer tapping out a rhythm on a utility pole next to my driveway. And there stood our HOA president, Denise Carver. Blazer-pressed laminated badge like a toy sheriff. Star nailing up a bright yellow notice that said, "My home was being reassigned for community purposes under Bylaw 31C. And I had 2 hours to relocate. I walked out in a robe, concrete cool under my feet, and asked easy voice, investigator voice, who authorized you to post legal notices on my pole? And she gave me that smile that only looks friendly if you're not the one getting steamrolled. And she said, "Perfect timing, Jordan. We need to discuss your temporary relocation for the greater good." And in my line of work, you hear the phrase greater good, and you start counting spoons. So I told her to email me everything. The bylaw text, any emergency declaration board minutes, county approvals. All of it. Because real authority loves daylight, while fakes love the clock. And she tried to squeeze me with the window. A short line, you know what I mean? And I just photographed the notice because the paperweight was wrong. The fonts fought each other. The seal looked like clip art. The whole thing fluttered like a surrender flag on the wrong team. 2 days later, the wellness check started knock at 7:30 a.m. Officer Miguel Alvarez. Decent guy had tipped. "Sorry to bother you. We got a report of smells and odd noises. Probably nothing. Protocol is protocol." And I showed him the photos of the yellow notice. He studied them and said, "Yeah, that's not an official anything. If someone is using fake paperwork to pressure you, document everything." So I did, and while I documented the rumors, grew legs, my neighbor Ruth pulled me aside with that librarian whisper and said the community was concerned about my erratic behavior and late-night activity. And I felt heat behind my ears, because that's how they do it first. They make you look unstable. Then they say they're here to help. Then they move in. That night I set a small camera in my window aimed at the oak across the street, and at 10 p.m. it caught a silhouette behind the tree shoulders. Squared notebook out. Binoculars up. Then a telephoto lens. And when I pulled the frames into my laptop, you could see her lapel badge reflected off the bark, clear as a passport photo. Denise playing detective in the dark with a clipboard. And the next morning, a pink sheet slid under my door like a snake. Bold header, official property inspection warrant signed by Senior Compliance Officer D. Carver of the Community Integrity Office citing emergency ordinance. And I promise you, I know fake paper by touch. Real warrants carry a judge's signature and a court header. Not a volunteer title and clip art scales of justice tilted like a joke. The doorbell rang. Denise stood there with a man in a navy blazer carrying a briefcase like it might bite, and she said, "Me voir, sir." Hale, step aside. Mandatory safety assessment. Authorized by Emergency Ordinance 180A. Inspector Denton will document violations, and I held the pink sheet between two fingers and said, we've got problems. There's no community integrity office in this county. Warrants aren't hot pink, and 118A doesn't exist. Let's put Officer Alvarez on speaker. If your authority is real, he'll confirm it. And Denton's eyes went glassy while Denise tried to lower her voice into official. But Miguel picked up on the second ring and said, that's not a real warrant, and impersonating an official is criminal. Want me to come by? And that was the first time I watched her confidence flicker like a candle. By noon, I had Northline Community Management on the phone, and they confirmed she was a newsletter volunteer with zero enforcement power. The county clerk confirmed the government doesn't do emergency reassignment of private homes for community use. That's called eminent domain, and it comes with judges and compensation. And I started stacking everything on my dining table into a timeline, because paper only sings when you arrange it in key. Then I called a few people I trust when a neighbor dispute grows teeth. Lila Torres, the building code inspector, who can smell a forged format at 10 paces. Grant Whitman, the HOA governance mediator. With granite patience, Priya Shah, the forensic accountant, whose talent is finding where money went to hide, and we spread it all out like a puzzle. We already knew the picture for, and Lila tapped the pink warrant and the yellow notice and said, but wrong clause, wrong deal is a vector from a clip art pack. No one with authority signed, because no authority exists. Theater dressed as government. And Grant flipped through our bylaws and public notices and said she built a shadow structure with invented titles and no votes. Volunteers can remind you to move your cans. They cannot evict anyone. And Priya sat quiet for 20 minutes, then said, got it, and walked me through a flow of funds labeled emergency landscaping and fast-track safety and temporary lodging for board officials during renovations to vendors that don't exist in state registries. Riverline Response, Denton and Sons. Starcrest Safety. Money out, no work orders, no materials. Receipts roughly $12,000 over 18 months. And that right there was the twist that changed the story from harassment to theft. Denise's attorney called with a voice like a luxury mattress ad and threatened defamation if I didn't retract, and I told him my lawyer would respond. And meanwhile, he could explain the payments to fake vendors for projects the board never approved, and you could hear the pause, you could hear the fear trying to gather itself into words. That happened. We scheduled a community meeting for Tuesday at 7 at the Cedar Brook Activity Hall, and I built a slideshow that would land, even if you only half listened. The yellow notice on one slide with arrows pointing at the mismatched fonts. The pink warrant beside a real court order, so the difference punched through. Then a pattern slide with the wellness calls and the photos of Denise behind the oak at 10:07 and 10:41 binoculars. Catching porch light, then Priya's money chart with dates and memo lines and arrows. To nowhere, then signed statements from Lila and Grant. And Priya, because receipts are receipts, and the room filled. Early arms crossed, eyebrows up. Some folks sitting near the aisle like they wanted to bolt. If things got ugly, and Alvarez stood in the back, steady, the kind of quiet that makes loud people less sure of themselves. I walked the timeline without adjectives, dates and name. Send confirmations from the management company and the county. Then let pictures talk, because you can argue with a person. It's harder to argue with the way ink sits on paper. And halfway through, Denise popped up and said, "This is a vendetta, and I acted for the community, and Jordan has been non-compliant for months, and we had emergency authority, and I clicked to the bank records and said, "Show us the minutes where these projects were approved. Show us the licenses for Riverline Response and Denton & Sons. Show us the vote authorizing lodging for board officials. Show us one legitimate invoice matched to real work." And the room got that special quiet where people stop borrowing their opinion from the person who talks the most and start using their eyes. Lila explained how real enforcement paperwork looks. Grant explained how governance works when it's real. Priya taught the numbers at a pace everyone could follow, and when the board chair nodded to Alvarez, he said forged documents and impersonating an official. Our crimes and misuse of funds is a criminal matter. And I'm here as an observer, but I am documenting what I've seen and heard. And then a motion came from the floor to remove Denise from all volunteer positions and refer everything to law enforcement. And the management company seconded fast. Hands went up like a tide, and I counted without meaning to, because sometimes your brain tries to save a Polaroid of the moment you stop being the problem and start being the person who wouldn't let it slide. Alvarez stepped forward and said, "Carver, I need to speak with you about the documents presented tonight and the statements made. Please come with me." And she stood slow, like she could think a new reality into place, and her laminated badge snagged on the plastic chair and popped off and hit the floor with this small, honest sound that told the truth better than I ever could. I'm not going to dress it up. I didn't save the world. I just did the boring work that makes bullies break. I asked for paper. I verified paper. I let smarter people than me talk about what they know. And I pushed through the part of me that hates being the center of anything. Because silence is a ladder for people who build thrones out of rules they invented in their garage. And if you've ever been looked at like the problem just because you asked a fair question, you know the mix of relief and anger that washes through when the room finally sees what you saw on day one. We're still grinding forward. The referral went out. The management company is auditing. The county opened a file. Our board is rewriting communication policies so no one with a laminator can crown themselves. But the story ends right where it should. In that room with the vote, with the officer asking her to step aside with a plastic badge on the floor and a neighborhood remembering it has a spine. So here's my question for you, and I mean, it did. We draw the line in the right place, or did we wait too long to draw it at all? How much power should any neighborhood hand to people who volunteer to keep everyone else in line? Have you seen a fake badge knock on the wrong door? Tell me where you stand. Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your take in the comments. Argue with me. If you need to share your own story, if you've got one. Because justice only works when we talk about where it failed and where it finally held. And if someone slides a pink warrant under your door, remember real authority doesn't need clip art. It shows up calm and asks you to step outside.